They had the world at their feet. Two striking identical twins, chart-topping hits, and an international fan base that hung on every lyric they sang. But behind the eyeliner, the flashing lights, and the rebellious fashion, there was a war brewing. One not between the sisters, but between them and an entire industry that once promised them the world, then tried to silence them. Why did the Veronicas, Australia's pop darlings, declare open war on the music industry that made them famous? Before their triumphant return as fierce independent artists, the Veronicas vanished from the charts for nearly a decade. No scandal, no official breakup, just silence. For years, fans were left in the dark, speculating wildly. Was it burnout? A personal rift? Creative block? The truth, when it came out, was darker than anyone expected. In interviews, the twins would later reveal how they had been held hostage by their record label, forbidden from releasing music, and emotionally manipulated by industry executives who wanted control over every note, every lyric, every look. One of them would even compare it to being in an abusive relationship. And that was just the beginning. What followed was a chaotic spiral of public meltdowns, private betrayals, explosive relationships, media attacks, and a quiet rebellion against the powers that be. Jessica and Lisa Origliasso weren't just fighting for their careers. They were fighting for their identity, their art, and their right to be heard. This isn't just a story about fame, success, and downfall. It's about resistance. It's about two women who were told to sit down, smile, and sing, and who chose instead to stand up and scream. Tonight, we uncover the long-buried truth behind the Veronicas' fall from grace and the burning resentment that still lingers between them and the industry that betrayed them. The year was 2005. Australia's pop scene was in flux, caught between the fading glitter of early 2000s bubblegum acts and the rising roar of alternative and emo rock. Then came two sharp-edged voices from Brisbane, twin sisters Lisa and Jessica Origliasso, who called themselves the Veronicas. With jet black hair, punk attitude, and piercing harmonies, they crashed onto the scene like a rebellious storm wrapped in eyeliner and heartbreak. Their debut album, The Secret Life of, wasn't just a commercial success, it was a cultural shift. For young Australians, especially teenage girls caught between angst and identity, the Veronicas weren't just pop stars. They were icons. What made them different? Everything. Unlike most manufactured girl groups of the time, the Veronicas wrote their own songs, raw, autobiographical, confessional. Tracks like Forever and Everything I'm Not were rebellious anthems of self-declaration. They weren't here to be cute, they were here to be loud, emotional, messy, and real. And their sound, a fusion of pop-punk and synth-driven hooks, earned them instant comparisons to Avril Lavigne, Kelly Clarkson, even Paramore. But they weren't anyone's imitation. They were originals. And they were unstoppable, or so it seemed. Their early fame wasn't just national, it exploded globally. With Untouched, they became the first Australian act to reach the US top 20 in over 2 decades. Touring with the likes of Natasha Bedingfield and Fall Out Boy, they became international stars overnight. But fame brought pressure. And with that pressure came control. What fans didn't see was the tightening grip of the machine behind the music. Their record label, Warner Music, loved their edgy image, but only on their own terms. The girls were encouraged to be bold, but not too bold. Sexy, but not threatening. Emotional, but not controversial. Any step outside the carefully curated mold sparked internal warnings, delays, and eventually silence. As their second album, Hook Me Up, soared in the charts, conflicts with executives began to escalate. Creative disagreements turned into battles. The sisters wanted more control. The label wanted compliance. The industry that once hailed them as saviors of Australian pop now saw them as liabilities. Too opinionated, too independent, too hard to manage. The tension reached a breaking point after their third studio album faced repeated delays. What should have been their biggest era became a creative prison. For years, the Veronicas were trapped in a contract that kept them from releasing new music. Publicly, they maintained a brave face. Privately, they were unraveling. And as if label wars weren't enough, the media began to circle like vultures. Jessica's highly publicized relationship with Ruby Rose became a feeding frenzy for tabloids, especially when it ended in dramatic, very public heartbreak. Rumors of internal conflicts between the sisters added fuel to the fire. Every move was dissected. every silence weaponized. The Veronicas had gone from Australia's pop revolution to industry outcasts. But they weren't done yet. What they would do next would define not just their career, but their legacy. Before they were the Veronicas, Lisa and Jessica Origliasso were just two girls from Albany Creek, a quiet suburb in Brisbane, harmonizing together in their bedroom and performing under the name Lisa and Jess. From a young age, they were inseparable, musically and emotionally synced in a way only twins can be. Their parents nurtured their talent, taking them to local gigs and competitions, helping them record early demos. At first, their music was sweet and folky, more acoustic than anthemic. But something shifted in their teenage years. A fire lit inside them, one that would change everything. In 2004, they signed with Engine Room and soon after, Warner Music. It was a dream come true. Overnight, they went from local hopefuls to major label artists, given access to top producers, songwriters, and a marketing machine. But with the contract came compromise. They had to fight to keep their name. The Veronicas, inspired by Winona Ryder's character in the dark teen cult film Heathers. The name was defiant, their image was sharpened, and their music, raw, catchy, and confrontational. The Secret Life of wasn't just their debut, it was a manifesto. They became Australia's it girls. Their faces were on magazine covers, their songs blasted on radio stations across the globe. Their style, part punk, part glam, always rebellious, set trends. They weren't afraid to speak their minds, diss other artists, or challenge expectations. Young fans idolized them. Older critics didn't know what to make of them. But the Veronicas didn't care. They were finally seen, finally heard. Then came Hook Me Up in 2007, an album that marked a sonic shift toward electronic pop. The title track hit #1 in Australia. Untouched became a global phenomenon, charting in the US, UK, and Europe. Their performances were electric. They headlined sold-out tours, appeared on late-night shows, and shared stages with the likes of the Jonas Brothers and Pink. For a brief moment, it seemed like nothing could stop them. But behind the scenes, things were crumbling. Warner Music began tightening creative control. Songs they wrote were rejected. Release dates were pushed back without explanation. The label began favoring younger, more malleable pop acts. The twins, once the darlings of the industry, were now being told to tone it down, be more marketable, follow trends. The girls pushed back, and the label pushed harder. By the early 2010s, the cracks were showing. Their long-awaited third album was delayed again and again. Warner gave them no timeline, no support. The twins fell into a limbo of legal battles and broken promises. For 5 years, they couldn't release new music. 5 years in an industry that moves at the speed of likes and retweets. They spiraled. Interviews became tense. Their social media presence grew erratic. Rumors of feuds between the sisters dominated tabloids. Fans began to speculate. Had they broken up? Were they done for good? Then, in 2014, they finally broke the silence with You Ruin Me, a haunting ballad that struck a chord across the country. It shot to #1 in Australia, their first chart topper in 7 years. But the lyrics were different now. They were raw, resentful, broken. It wasn't just a breakup song, it was a confession. And the industry? They pretended to welcome them back. But behind the scenes, the resentment festered. The Veronicas were no longer willing to play nice. They had seen too much, lost too much, been silenced too long. The fire that had once launched their fame had now become a weapon. They weren't here to charm. They were here to expose. What the Veronicas endured during their years in the shadows wasn't just creative suffocation. It was emotional warfare. In candid interviews years later, they would describe their time under Warner Music as being held hostage. For 5 long years, they recorded entire albums that were never released. Songs that bled from their personal heartbreaks, their struggles, their truth, discarded without explanation. The label, once their greatest ally, had become their silent jailer. And the worst part? They were contractually gagged, unable to speak out without risking everything. Lisa and Jessica were not victims in the traditional sense. They were fighters. But even fighters break. The years of suppression led them both into spirals of depression and anxiety. Lisa later admitted that there were days she couldn't get out of bed. Jessica began pulling away, not just from the industry, but from her sister. They stopped speaking for weeks at a time, an unthinkable rift for twins once inseparable. The cracks deepened during Jessica's tumultuous relationship with Ruby Rose. Their love affair was fast, fiery, and heavily scrutinized. It wasn't just the tabloids that fed on it. Industry insiders whispered about how the relationship was too controversial, too gay, too distracting. When it ended, badly, the fallout was everywhere. Jessica's personal pain was splashed across headlines, while fans turned the breakup into internet drama. It wasn't just a broken heart, it was character assassination. And then came the betrayal that almost broke them. In 2016, after years of silence, they finally completed their third album independently, only to find it shelved again. No warning, no explanation, just buried. The emotional toll was unbearable. That same year, they began speaking out, not just with music, but with fury. They used their Instagram stories to call out their label. They appeared on talk shows with veiled references to manipulation and emotional abuse. They refused to play along anymore. The Veronicas weren't going to be pretty, polite, or obedient. In a particularly emotional moment during an appearance on the project, Jessica broke down on air, saying, "It was like being in an abusive relationship with someone who held all the power, and you're screaming to be heard, but they just smile and shut the door." It was a moment that silenced the room and echoed across the industry. The media response was mixed. Some praised their bravery, applauding them for finally breaking their silence. Others accused them of playing victims, of using controversy to stay relevant. The truth, as always, was more complicated. These were not attention-seeking pop stars. These were women who had been chewed up by the very system that once paraded them as trophies. Even their reconciliation as sisters became public fodder. In 2019, they unfollowed each other on Instagram, reigniting rumors of a final split. When they reappeared, it was on The Masked Singer Australia, together, fierce and unapologetic. In their post-reveal interviews, they didn't just perform. They made statements about industry toxicity, about emotional survival, about women who refuse to be broken. Then, in 2021, they released Godzilla and Human, two albums that served as both resurrection and revenge. Godzilla was chaotic, loud, rebellious. Human was stripped back, raw, introspective. Together, they told the full story: the anger, the healing, the pain, the peace. The Veronicas had finally reclaimed their voices, not just in song, but in truth. Channel opinion. The story of the Veronicas is not just about music. It's about control. It's about power. It's about two women who were sold a dream, only to discover it came with invisible chains. And when they tried to break free, the very system that built them tried to erase them. From the perspective of Aussie Uncovered, the Veronicas represent something both cautionary and courageous. Yes, they were difficult. Yes, they were emotional, unpredictable, and at times defiant. But isn't that exactly what the industry pretends to celebrate? Authenticity? Individuality? The truth is, the industry wants rebellion, but only the kind they can package. The moment the Veronicas became unmanageable, they became a threat. It's easy to dismiss their battles as drama, social media feuds, public meltdowns, tabloid scandals. But beneath those headlines is a deeper pain, the pain of being silenced, controlled, and commodified. Their story mirrors countless others, especially female artists who've been told to shrink, soften, conform. The Veronicas refused, and they paid the price. What makes their journey unique is how openly they fought back. Most artists suffer quietly, behind closed doors. Lisa and Jess chose to expose the machine while they were still inside it. They didn't wait for a tell-all book. They fought in real time, raw and messy, using the only weapon they had left, their voices. Are they perfect? No. Have they made mistakes? Undeniably. But that's what makes their story compelling. The Veronicas didn't survive by staying silent. They survived by being loud. Their twin dynamic adds another layer of complexity. In an industry that often drives families apart, their relationship, strained as it became, never fully broke. They fought, they distanced, but they came back. That bond is unshakable. And in a world built on solo egos, that unity is both rare and powerful. As a channel that uncovers the untold, the misunderstood, and the hidden scars behind fame, we believe the Veronicas embody the raw, unfiltered truth of what the entertainment world often does to its brightest talents. Their story is not just one of downfall and comeback. It's a mirror held up to an industry that feeds on youth, controversy, and control. But we want to hear from you. Do you believe the Veronicas were victims of a toxic system or architects of their own chaos? Were they unfairly punished for speaking out, or did they cross lines no artist should? Is their legacy one of brilliance or burnout? Tell us what you see behind the makeup, the glitter, the headlines. There's something haunting about the Veronicas. Not just their music, but their story. It lingers, like a voice that trembles but doesn't break, like a twin harmony that carries the weight of everything unsaid. They were the voice of a generation too young to articulate its rage and too old for its innocence. For many, Forever was more than a song. It was a declaration. You Ruin Me wasn't just heartbreak, it was survival. Their music didn't just soundtrack teenage years, it branded them. And yet, while their hits echoed through bedrooms, cars, and festival fields, the real battle played out offstage. Contracts, silence, betrayal. Fame offered them the world, but not the freedom. And so they fought, loudly, recklessly, honestly. Now, with the industry behind them and independence ahead, the Veronicas remain a symbol of duality, glamour and grit, stardom and scars. They're still here, not as the polished pop duo crafted for mass appeal, but as raw artists who carry every bruise like a badge. And whether you loved them at their peak or rediscovered them in their pain, one thing is clear: they never stopped being real. Some stories are never told. Some truths never make it past the studio door. But now, you know. They were never just pretty faces on an album cover. They were, and still are, two women who refused to be quiet. And long after the final note fades, the echo of their defiance remains.